The 1980s gave us some of the boldest science fiction movies ever made.
Oh, I guess it was 2 years ago.
Movies that push boundaries with violence, politics, sexuality, and shocking imagery. Some were so disturbing, so ahead of their time, that governments around the world slapped them with bans. From films accused of corrupting youth to dystopian nightmares that authorities thought were too dangerous for society, these movies didn't just entertain, they outraged. Today, we're digging into the 15 most controversial 80s sci-fi movies that got banned. And trust me, the last one will leave you stunned. Welcome to Vintiverse, the channel where we bring forgotten cinema back to life. If you love diving into the weird, the banned, and the controversial, make sure to subscribe to Vintiverse. And don't forget to like this video, share it with fellow movie fans, and let us know in the comments which of these banned 80s sci-fi flicks shocked you the most. Number 15, The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1980. Nicholas Roeg's The Man Who Fell to Earth, originally released in 1976.
Where I come from, there's a terrible drought. We saw pictures of your planet on television.
Was re-released in the early 80s to capture Bowie's global fame. Instead, it was met with bans and outrage. The film tells the story of an alien named Thomas Jerome Newton, played by Bowie, who comes to Earth searching for water to save his dying planet. But instead of finding salvation, Newton falls into the traps of human greed, corruption, and addiction. What made it so controversial wasn't just the surreal narrative, it was the mix of graphic nudity, unsettling sex scenes, and Bowie's hauntingly detached performance. Censors in the UK called it obscene, claiming it crossed moral boundaries and presented sexuality in a disturbing way. By the mid-1980s, The Man Who Fell to Earth wasn't just a film, it was a symbol. It represented artistic rebellion against censorship, a warning about consumerism and the dangers of human excess. Number 14, Android, 1982. In 1982, a small independent sci-fi film called Android tried to ask a simple question. What happens when a machine starts wanting the things only humans are supposed to crave? Starring Klaus Kinski, a man already notorious for his dark, volatile roles, Android wasn't a flashy blockbuster. It was intimate, claustrophobic, and unsettling, and that's exactly why it got banned in several countries. The story follows Max 404, an android assistant who lives on a remote space station with his creator, Dr. Daniel. Max has been programmed to serve, obey, and exist quietly. But as he watches old Earth movies and listens to music, he begins to feel something new: desire. He dreams of being human, he dreams of love, and eventually, those desires push him to rebellion. On the first hand, censors in Singapore and Malaysia took one look at Android and shut it down. But in the United States and Europe, critics saw something deeper. They praised it as a philosophical gem disguised as a B-movie. Was Max really a machine? Or was he something more? And if an android could feel love, did that make it more human than the cruel, manipulative scientists who built him? Number 13, The Brood, 1980. Before the 1980s turned him into the king of body horror, David Cronenberg shocked the world with The Brood. Released in 1979 but gaining international circulation throughout the 80s, the film was unlike anything audiences had seen. It wasn't just a horror movie, it was a science fiction nightmare about rage, trauma, and the horrifying power of the human mind. The story centers on a man whose wife is undergoing experimental therapy at a psychiatric institute. But this isn't ordinary therapy. It's a radical process where patients physically manifest their suppressed emotions. In her case, that repression takes form as deformed, mutant children birthed from sacs on her body who act out her violent rage by murdering anyone she feels has wronged her. For censors, this was too much. In the UK, Australia, and several European countries, The Brood was banned outright. Authorities cited the film's disturbing violence involving children as the main reason. To them, it wasn't just grotesque, it was morally unacceptable. Number 12, Scanners, 1981. Imagine sitting in a packed theater in 1981. The lights go down, the screen flickers alive, and within minutes, a man's head explodes in a shower of blood and brain matter. That was the moment Scanners seared itself into movie history and onto the radar of censors worldwide. Directed by David Cronenberg, yes, again, Scanners told the story of telepaths known as scanners, people with terrifying psychic powers who could control, manipulate, and even destroy others with their minds. At its core, the film was about corporate exploitation, power struggles, and the dangers of unchecked technology. But for most people, all they remembered was that scene, the gruesome, graphic, and shockingly realistic head explosion. For audiences in the United States, it became a cult sensation. But in places like the UK, Australia, and parts of Europe, censors didn't see art, they saw a threat. In Britain, Scanners landed on the infamous Video Nasties list, a collection of films labeled too extreme for home viewing. But here's the twist. The bans and censorship didn't kill Scanners. It made it legendary. Word of mouth about the exploding head movie spread like wildfire. Bootleg VHS tapes circulated underground, often passed around like forbidden treasure. People who hadn't even seen the film talked about it, creating a mythology that was sometimes more powerful than the movie itself. Number 11. Altered States, 1980. Ken Russell's Altered States wasn't just a sci-fi movie. It was a psychedelic trip into the deepest corners of human consciousness. Based on the novel by Paddy Chayefsky, the film follows Dr. Edward Jessup, a Harvard scientist obsessed with exploring altered states of mind. Through dangerous experiments in sensory deprivation tanks and hallucinogenic drugs, Jessup begins to regress, both mentally and physically, into something primal, something that predates humanity itself. On the surface, it's a science fiction thriller about a man pushing the limits of knowledge, but the visuals, they were unlike anything audiences had ever seen. Jessup's body twists and mutates in grotesque transformations. His visions explode with religious and sexual imagery, and the line between science and mysticism dissolves into chaos. For censors, this was a nightmare. In the United States, religious groups condemned it as blasphemy, accusing Russell of mocking God and glorifying evolution. In several Middle Eastern countries, it was outright banned, deemed offensive to faith and morality. Even in more liberal territories, theaters cut sequences that were considered too disturbing, particularly the violent body horror scenes that showed Jessup devolving into a primitive beast. Number 10. Xtro, 1982. Some movies don't just get banned, they get buried. Xtro is one of them. Released in 1982, this British sci-fi horror became infamous almost instantly for one scene: a woman graphically giving birth, not to a baby, but to a full-grown man. The film tells the story of Sam, a man abducted by aliens who suddenly returns to Earth years later, forever changed. But he hasn't come back to reunite with his family, he's come back as a vessel of alien horror. From there, the film spirals into nightmarish territory with shocking violence, surreal imagery, and one of the most disturbing birth sequences ever put on film. When it premiered, critics were outraged. Some called it filth, others dismissed it as exploitative trash. But what really sealed its fate was the British Board of Film Classification. Xtro was outright banned in the UK, labeled obscene, and denied distribution. In the US, it was given an X rating, practically ensuring it couldn't play in mainstream theaters. Even video stores hesitated to carry it, fearing backlash. Was Xtro trashy? Absolutely. Was it shocking? Without question. But it was also a bold experiment, daring to push the boundaries of what sci-fi horror could be. Instead of sleek spaceships and philosophical debates, it offered raw, grotesque nightmare fuel. And while most critics dismissed it at the time, today it's remembered as a cult classic. A reminder that sometimes the movies society tries hardest to erase are the ones that refuse to die. Number 9. Videodrome, 1983. By 1983, David Cronenberg had already earned a reputation as the master of body horror, but with Videodrome, he went further than ever before, creating a film so controversial that governments around the world tried to bury it. The story follows Max Wren, a sleazy cable TV executive played by James Woods, who stumbles upon a mysterious pirate broadcast called Videodrome. The program shows nothing but torture and murder, No plots, no actors, just raw violence. At first, Ren thinks it's just another form of extreme entertainment he can profit from. But soon the show begins to warp his mind. He hallucinates grotesque mutations, including a pulsating flesh-like television set and a stomach slip that swallows videotapes and guns. For audiences, this was disturbing enough, but for censors, Videodrome was pure poison. In Britain, it was nearly placed on the Video Nasties list for its explicit sexual violence. In Germany, officials banned it outright, claiming it blurred the line between fantasy and reality in dangerous ways. In the US, it was heavily cut in certain markets, stripping away the surreal, nightmarish imagery that gave it power. Number 8. The Thing, 1982. When John Carpenter's The Thing hit theaters in 1982, audiences weren't ready. They expected another fun alien adventure like E.T. What they got instead was a claustrophobic nightmare dripping with paranoia, mistrust, and some of the most grotesque special effects in film history. The plot is deceptively simple. A research team in Antarctica discovers a parasitic alien life form that can perfectly imitate any living creature. As suspicion spreads among the crew, no one can trust anyone else. And when the alien reveals itself, the transformations are unforgettable. Tentacles, teeth, and gore exploding in every direction. Censors hated it. But while mainstream audiences turned away, underground fans embraced it. The very qualities that got it banned, its nihilism, its shocking effects, its bleak, hopeless ending, made it a cult legend. Over time, critics reevaluated it, hailing it as one of the greatest sci-fi horrors ever made. Today, the same film once condemned for being too disturbing is now considered John Carpenter's masterpiece. Number 7. A Clockwork Orange, 1980s UK band. Technically released in 1971, A Clockwork Orange haunted the entire 1980s in Britain because you simply couldn't watch it. Set in a dystopian near future, the film follows Alex DeLarge and his gang of droogs as they commit acts of brutal violence, sexual assault, and mindless cruelty. Eventually, Alex is arrested and subjected to an experimental form of aversion therapy designed to strip him of his violent tendencies, but at the cost of his free will. The UK media of the 70s and 80s was obsessed with violent crime, and many newspapers blamed A Clockwork Orange directly for inspiring real attacks. Whether true or not, the public perception was enough to push Kubrick into requesting its withdrawal, making it inaccessible for British audiences throughout the 80s. What happened next was predictable. The band transformed it into the most sought-after forbidden fruits of the decade. Bootleg VHS copies circulated in secret, often sold at inflated prices. Students held underground screenings, and every time someone got their hands on it, the film's reputation grew. By the time it was finally re-released in the UK in 2000, it wasn't just a movie, it was a myth. And while governments tried to suppress its disturbing images of violence and control, what endured was its warning about the dangers of authoritarian power, censorship, and the human cost of trying to fix society by stripping away choice. Number 6. They Live, 1988. John Carpenter didn't just make horror, he made political dynamite. And in 1988, he released They Live, a sci-fi action film that was less about aliens and more about us. The film follows Nada, a drifter played by professional wrestler Roddy Piper, who discovers a pair of sunglasses that reveal the horrifying truth. Earth is secretly controlled by aliens disguised as humans. Through subliminal messaging hidden in advertising and media, they manipulate people into obeying, consuming, and conforming. Billboards that once advertised products suddenly flash words like obey, consume, and sleep. For American audiences, it was a fun, paranoid allegory, but in authoritarian countries, it was a direct threat. Several South American governments banned it outright, fearing its message of rebellion against invisible rulers would encourage dissent. Even in the United States, some critics blasted it as dangerous propaganda for its not-so-subtle jabs at consumer culture, Reagan-era politics, and the elites who controlled both media and money. Number 5. Society, 1989. Some movies get banned because of violence, others because of politics. Society got banned because no one had ever seen anything like it before. Released in 1989, this surreal sci-fi horror from director Brian Yuzna begins like a satire of Beverly Hills wealth and privilege. Bill Whitney, a teenage boy from an upper-class family, starts to suspect something is wrong with the people around him. His parents, his therapist, even his sister. They all seem off. They whisper behind closed doors. They treat him like an outsider, and their smiles are just a little too wide. And then comes the infamous finale, the shunting. Bill discovers that the wealthy literally feed on the poor, merging their bodies in a grotesque orgy of flesh-devouring humans in a slimy, melting skin and blood. The scene is so shocking, so outrageous, that it instantly cemented Society as one of the most notorious films of the decade. Censors around the world recoiled. Several European countries, including Germany and Spain, banned it outright. In Asia, it was deemed obscene and unfit for public morality. Even in the United States, where it technically wasn't banned, it was relegated to limited midnight screenings, dismissed as disgusting trash. But for horror and sci-fi fans, it wasn't just gore. It was social commentary.
Number 4. Hardware, 1990. Technically released in 1990, Richard Stanley's Hardware was an 80s film in spirit, born from the era's punk rock, cyberpunk, and fear of technological collapse. And almost as soon as it hit screens, it was slapped with bans. The story begins in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. A scavenger discovers a robotic skull in the desert and sells it to a scrap dealer. From there, it winds up in the hands of Jill, a struggling artist, who uses it as part of a sculpture in her apartment. What she doesn't know is that the skull belongs to a military killbot, programmed to reactivate, repair itself, and kill. Soon, the machine is reborn, turning her apartment into a slaughterhouse. Visually, Hardware is drenched in neon and blood. The killbot is relentless, slicing, stabbing, and burning through its victims. But what really disturbed authorities wasn't just the gore, it was the film's atmosphere. It was bleak, anarchic, and brimming with rage at the system. The world of Hardware wasn't just destroyed by war, it was ruled by corrupt governments and corporations. In Britain, censors attacked it for sadistic violence. In Ireland, it was outright banned. Other countries hacked away at its runtime until it was barely coherent. Yet the fans who managed to see it recognized it as something more than splatter. It was cyberpunk poetry, a furious scream against consumerism, militarization, and environmental collapse. Number 3. Cannibal Holocaust. No list of banned sci-fi and horror films would be complete without Cannibal Holocaust. Though technically released in 1980, its shadow haunted the entire decade. The film follows a documentary crew who vanish while filming a tribe deep in the Amazon rainforest. Months later, their footage is recovered, revealing shocking acts of brutality and violence that look so real, director Ruggero Deodato was arrested for murder. Authorities believed he had actually killed the actors on camera. He hadn't. But what was real, and what made the film so infamous, was its use of actual animal killings. Turtles, monkeys, and pigs were slaughtered on screen, shocking even the most hardened audiences. Because of this, Cannibal Holocaust was banned in over 50 countries, from Australia to the UK to much of Europe. In some places, possession of the VHS could land you in prison. But the controversy also raised uncomfortable questions. Was the film just exploitation, or was it biting satire? Deodato claimed it was a commentary on Western exploitation of indigenous people and the sensationalism of media. The final scene, where executives watch the recovered footage and debate how to sell it, drives home the point. Who's the real savage? The tribe or us? Number 2. Threads, 1984. What could be so disturbing about a TV movie that entire countries refused to air it? The answer is Threads. Released in 1984 by the BBC, Threads was a docudrama about nuclear war. It follows the ordinary people of Sheffield, England, as global tensions escalate into full-scale nuclear conflict. There are no heroes, no victories, only devastation. The film depicts the bombs falling, the cities burning, and the survivors slowly starving, mutating, and dying in a gray wasteland of radiation. It was so realistic, so brutally unflinching that it traumatized audiences. People fainted during broadcasts. Teachers reported that students who saw it had nightmares for weeks. In the US, when it aired on television, some viewers called emergency hotlines, convinced a real nuclear attack was underway. Several governments refused to screen it at all. In Australia and parts of Europe, broadcasters banned it for being too horrifying. Authorities feared it would cause panic, despair, or even social unrest. And in truth, they weren't wrong. Threads didn't just entertain, it terrified. Unlike most banned films, Threads wasn't about gore or shock, it was about truth. It forced audiences to confront what nuclear war would actually look like, not as abstract politics, but as shattered families and poisoned futures.
Number 1. Akira, 1988. When Akira exploded onto the scene in 1988, it changed animation and sci-fi forever. But it also terrified governments around the world. Set in a dystopian Neo-Tokyo, rebuilt after a mysterious explosion, the film follows Kanina, a biker gang leader, and his friend Tetsuo, who gains uncontrollable psychic powers after a government experiment. What begins as teenage rebellion escalates into a city-destroying battle between human and superhuman forces. The animation was groundbreaking, fluid, detailed, and violent, but it was the content that sparked bans. The film depicted graphic gore, political corruption, biker gang warfare, and anti-authoritarian rebellion. In Malaysia and parts of China, it was banned outright, accused of glorifying chaos. In the US, it was heavily edited in early releases, removing some of its more shocking imagery. But censorship only made it stronger. Fans smuggled uncensored copies across borders, and Akira became a rallying point for underground anime culture. College clubs screened it late at night, often to packed rooms of students who'd never seen animation so dark, so adult, and so uncompromising. Today, Akira is considered one of the greatest animated films ever made, credited with opening the door for anime worldwide. But in the late 80s, it was seen as dangerous. So dangerous, some countries tried to erase it. They failed. And like its psychic anti-heroes, Akira only grew stronger with resistance. If you enjoyed this dive into the darkest corners of cinema history, don't forget to like this video, share it with friends, and leave a comment telling us which banned 80s sci-fi movie shocked you the most. And of course, subscribe to Vintiverse for more journeys into the forbidden, the forgotten, and the controversial side of vintage cinema.